I set out to run the entirety of Merthyr Tydfil that night, a couple of nights later. And I went in Scott's balaclava because I was so embarrassed because of my weight gain and that the fact I hadn't moved since PE circa 1996. And the police stopped me and picked me up because they thought I was pinching something. So I don't know whether anyone else has run around Merthyr in a balaclava, but it's frowned upon.
Hello and welcome to the Running Tales podcast. I'm Craig Lewis, and the voice that you just heard was that of Hannah Phillips, relating the moment she was stopped by the police while wearing a balaclava while out on her very first run. Since then, running has completely changed Hannah's life. After falling in love with the sport, she decided to run a marathon, a decision which prompted her to write a book about her experiences. And that book, no run intended, became a bestseller, propelling her to a job with Welsh Athletics, encouraging other people to run. Along the way, running has also helped Hannah to deal with the heartbreak of miscarriage, restoring her faith in her body's capabilities and in her mental strength. I started our conversation by asking Hannah to explain what prompted her to start running. A story I'd heard was both embarrassing and inspiring.
Yeah, it's all true, unfortunately, as well. I started running well over a decade ago now because I mistook my reflection for that of someone else's on a night out. So I've got 3 girls now, and we don't say the word fat anymore. But when I was an arrogant 20-odd something old, not a very nice person, apparently, we were in a pub in Cardiff and I'd said to Scott, that fat girl's got my top on. And I would never say something like that. Like, normally I wouldn't say something like that. I don't know why I said it that night. By the time I realised said girl had the same jeans and highlights as me and that it was actually a mirror, I was quite distraught, partly because I was a horrible person, but mainly because I had put so much weight on. So we went home that night. I was really upset and I decided I was going to run because I knew people in the local pub run and they still had this great social life. So I was like, that's a no-brainer for me. Now, I hadn't moved since PE, like circa 1996. So this was, a big challenge. So I went out. I set out to run the entirety of Merthyr Tydfil that night, a couple of nights later. And I went in Scott's balaclava because I was so embarrassed because of my weight gain and that the fact I hadn't moved since PE circa 1996. And the police stopped me and picked me up because they thought I was pinching something. So I don't know whether anyone else has run around Merthyr in a balaclava, but it's frowned upon. So yeah, that was the start. Yeah, that was the start. And I got home and obviously I was really sweaty and I had to lie on the floor because I was just like, well, I was dead because I hadn't moved since 1996. And Scott was like, oh, that's it then, you're not going to do that again, are you? And I was like, oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? You'd love me not to go again. So that's how it started. It was more of a weight gain thing. 2, I just wanted to prove Scott wrong. So I carried on.
And did you have any sort of enjoyment out of the act of running at that stage, or was it purely that I'm just going to prove you wrong? And
yeah, it was basically I was going to prove Scott wrong. And I'm a bit stubborn like that. Once I had the bit between my teeth, I was like, right, I've got to crack this somehow, whether I do it. And I just I wanted it in my head, as long as I got 3 miles under my belt at some point, I would have been happy. But I signed up for Cardiff half straight away. I'd done 2 sessions on my own. The first where I'd been picked up by the police, and the second where I went again and I came home crying because I was like, this is horrible. And then I signed up for Cardiff half because I'd seen a girl that I went to school with had done it. And I was like, oh my God, if she'd done it, I'm bound to be able to do it. And that was the start, really. That was, I always say to people now, I think you definitely need a goal, especially if you're not used to sport or not used to activity. If you've got that goal at the end, the habit becomes, more integral to your life. So I think it was 10 or 12 weeks of training for that half marathon, which was quite good considering I'd never run before. And that was the start of it then. After that, I was like, oh, I'm going to sign up for something else, because I feel great and I've lost a little bit of weight. And I'm always really vocal now about the fact that I started for weight loss, but I maintain for very, very different reasons. So
yeah, and was it during that training for that first half that you felt, yeah, I am losing a bit of weight here, so that's great, but also I'm starting to enjoy running for, as you hinted, a load of other reasons? And
yeah. The crossover was we got married in the July and I did Cardiff half in the October. And by the time I'd done Cardiff half, we'd started trying for a baby, and it didn't go very well at all. Now it goes fine. It goes absolutely fine now, no problems whatsoever. But when we started, we had no problem getting pregnant. We just couldn't carry on with the pregnancy. We had several miscarriages, and where my body was failing there, it was still succeeding running. I still felt like I was achieving things, and I still felt like I had an element of control. And I still credit running for getting me through some of the darkest times. You know, we were so desperate for a baby, and it's completely out of your control, and it's a horrible, horrible place to be. And I remember we'd had one miscarriage, and I went for a run straight after. So I'd gone to hospital for that one, and I'd run straight after, and it was snowing. And I remember just like stopping in the snow and thinking, look what you're doing though. Like, you know, everything else is going wrong, but you can still do this. Your body's okay. And I think I started to get kinder to myself because of running. You know, running has changed my life massively, and I'm, you know, a really big advocate for it. But I credit it for saving my life. I credit it for getting me through things. And I just wish people could get past that discomfort bit to you know to realize that it opens so many doors. So
Yeah, because
yeah,
that first stage when you're out doing those first 3 miles or whatever, it can be pretty awful, particularly if you've had, like you were explaining, a bit of a gap away from the sport and maybe not done that much else, and yeah, everything just hurts afterwards, and you don't want to carry.
yeah,
But I think
I
you
was
went
like a
fairly,
starfish on the floor.
yeah. I was gonna say, I think you went fairly quickly from half marathon to deciding to take on the dreaded marathon distance after that.
Yeah, so again, still in the throes of trying for babies. So we managed to get pregnant and stay pregnant, and we had our first little girl in 2014, and she was absolutely perfect. And when she was one, I got pregnant accidentally. I say accidentally, we all know it's never quite accidental, but that's another podcast. we we got pregnant, and I had really horrible miscarriage that time that I was hospitalized for. And I was in the hospital bed that night thinking, you've literally got everything you want at home, and you've still got yourself in this mess. Like, what are this has got to stop. So that night, as my cervix had gone into shock, and I had to be, you know, monitored and everything. And that night on my phone in Prince Charles Hospital in Merthyr, I applied to run the London Marathon for Bliss. Bliss is a neonatal charity that sort of came under the umbrella of, like, you know, they look after babies born too small, too soon, and too sick. That used to be their tagline. So I was like, I'm going to run a marathon, because if I run a marathon, we're going to be way too tired to have any sex. And I've committed to something massive, so I won't get pregnant, hopefully, for the foreseeable. So that night I applied for Bliss, and they asked me how I was going to raise the money, because you have to raise an awful lot for charity. And I was like, I know, I'll write a book. I'll write a book so all my family and friends can buy this book, and then they'll get to the end and they'll feel so sorry for me because of this journey. They'll sponsor me anyway. So not only would I have made some money from the book, they're going to sponsor me at the end. And I should be able to do 2.5 grand with that, because I'm sure my uncle Stephen will sponsor me £100, you know? So I wrote this little book, and that changed everything again then. So No Run Intended was the book, and it came out in 2016, I think now. And it just went wild. It went far beyond my family and friends, and just completely changed the path for everything. So after that, I managed to get a job with Welsh Athletics at the with the social running provision, Run Wales, and I've been there. Well, I've just finished now, but I've been there. I was there for 6 years, like making a massive mark on social running and you know, inclusivity with running in Wales. So that little book just absolutely bypassed everything, and then running became a job then. And that's where we lost. I got lost a little bit for a while, but I seem to be back in the mindset of getting back out there again now. So
Yeah, and just going back a little bit, because obviously at that stage you say you were, you know, you're running for the challenge. You sort of thought everything's great at home because we have this one baby now who we can, you know, who we can love, and that's sort of tick that box is a really bad phrase, but you know what?
yeah, but yeah, that's what it was. It was like we had this perfect little girl, and I was still getting pregnant. And I was like, what are you playing at? So
Yeah. But what I was going to say is, in the end, and I don't know whether this was because you were more relaxed or it took your mind off it. You've obviously have gone on to have other children. Do you sort of put that down to running as well?
I wouldn't. I think obviously that what happened when the miscarriage after we had our first little girl Blossom, that was so bad because I was hospitalized, and it wasn't just a procedure. They were concerned. My cervix had gone into shock, and I thought I was going to die in Abercynon, weirdly, because I was losing so much blood. And I think after that the pressure had gone. I was like, you can't keep doing this. And then I was running, and I think everything else sort of slotted into place. So it might have been that I was more relaxed and that life was all right. Because when we got pregnant with our middle daughter now, Kiki, I was like, I'm pregnant. And we just couldn't get over that I was pregnant. Not that it was, we knew how it had happened, obviously, again, another podcast. But I was like, I can't believe we're pregnant. And we sort of said, well, historically they don't work out. So let's just see what happens. And it worked out. And we had Kiki in 2020. And then in 2022, we had another one. And it was like, and again, same situation. We were like, how has this happened? Historically, we can't keep a baby. Let's see what happens. And now we've gone, from a family of 3 to a family of 5 quite quickly, which if anybody watched that journey, which lots of people did, because I was really vocal about it in the early days, like, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And I think running obviously played a part because I was much healthier, I was much happier, and happier is the key with running. Like I said at the beginning, like, started for weight loss, maintained it for everything else.
And that was a message, I'm guessing, that you spread out through your work with Welsh Athletics and with what you're doing now, because you've kind of moved into that, if I'm right, you've moved into that mental health sphere and helping people in that way, haven't you?
Yeah. So I got involved with a charity called Big Moose when I was working for Welsh Athletics, because they have this massive, massive running community at events. They've got these white t-shirts with orange spots, and I was like, I need to meet these people because they are, they're grabbing these communities, like, and that's my job. I was like, how are they doing this? How are they getting so many people to run for them? So I met them a couple of years ago, and in 2021, I got quite poorly to the point where I didn't really have anywhere to turn. And I'd remember I'd gone to the doctors. I was like, I am running. I'm trying to eat healthy. I'd given up alcohol completely. And I still felt really poorly. And I'd walked into Big Moose for a work meeting about Cardiff Half. And Jeff and Chloe were there. And Jeff said to me, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. Because that's what we do. We pretend we're fine even when we don't feel very fine. And they offered me some free therapy because that's what they do. At the time, it was a really new provision. And he was like, why don't you have some therapy? And I was like, no, you use it on someone who needs it. And I had been on my knees just a couple of days before with Scott saying, I just can't carry on because I am done with this world. And, it's an awful, awful place to be. And Jeff then marketed it very cleverly and was like, look, we've got this provision. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Why don't you have some therapy and you can talk me through the sort of the provision, like how it works, and you can give me, some ideas if it doesn't work. And I was like, oh, brilliant. And a couple of days later, a guy called Graham rang me, and I absolutely broke down. And he gave me only 4 hours of therapy I had with him, but it absolutely changed everything. And I credit that with saving my life and changing my life. Because like I said at the beginning, running has saved my life a couple of times, but it didn't massively change anything. I got to a point where I was like, I can't do any more running, I'm running out of runs now. So I had this therapy, which really looked like, it's a Human Givens approach, it's called, and it really looked at my resources. And I think running came into therapy massively because Graham was like, look what you've done, look what you've achieved. And it was all running. I think when I die, when whoever gets up at my funeral, which I'd like a lady called Helen Frost to do it if she ever listens to it, they're gonna say, like, she ran marathons and she got a lot of people to help, she got a lot of people out there. And I'm, that's a lovely thought. That's, not obviously me dying, I don't want to die. But the fact that, I got people out there was massive, and I just wanted to give back. So I've just done my diploma in psychotherapy to give back for that reason. So
running's quite interesting because I think we speak a lot about it helps people with their mental health. It can be really good, but I've spoken to a few people who've had one or two things with their mental health, and I have myself as well. And I think running can almost become a bit of a crutch sometimes, where it's like, oh, everything's a bit rubbish, I'll go for a run, now I feel better. But you're never actually solving the bit rubbish, because running's kind of keeping you afloat, but it's not necessarily addressing the cause.
Yeah, and I think, very much like when I gave up alcohol, like I'd been using alcohol as a crutch. Take that away, and you're left with not a lot to stand on, so to speak. And it's the same with running. And like I've had it twice when I've been injured. I got hit by a car years ago and I had to stop running. And I just didn't know what to do with myself. I was like, I went and dyed my hair blonde a lot. I was like, right, I'm never going to run again because I just don't know who I am without it. And that's not happening. It was really, and I think it does replace things. And I think everything needs to be met in a balance, doesn't it? And I think if you put too much pressure on anything, it becomes too much. And I think that's what happens with running sometimes. I think people sort of change their lifestyle so radically, put everything into running. And again, you run out of paths sometimes, and that's okay. There are new paths, there are different paths, but you can't see that at the time. So I think it's really important to sometimes. And I think, like, one of the things was when I first went to the doctors, when I felt really, really bad, and I was running, and he was like, well, I just don't understand why you feel so terrible. Like, if you're running, I just don't get it. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, and I think that's important, that it doesn't always solve everything. Like, it will make everything better, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So
within this position now, I'm seeing you're doing quite a lot of exciting things, lots of talks and up on stage with people and doing all that sort of stuff. It must be pretty exciting to think about where running is taking you.
Oh, massively. And I keep having about turns. Like I don't want to go back to Welsh Athletics, not because I didn't love the job or because it wasn't for me, but because I'd outgrown the job and I think I'd done all I can in that arena. But I'm just massively, like, we were doing some soul searching on the weekend of like what I'm going to do, because definitely be a psychotherapist and things, but that will never be enough. Like, running is sort of ingrained in me now. And me and Scott, my husband, I came up with a couple of ideas over the weekend, and I was like, it all comes back to running. Whatever happens, it all comes back to running. So it's going to be interesting the next couple of years, I think. And I just hope, like I said, like when they get up at my funeral, they say she made a difference in that world, So
I suppose it's a fairly broad and basic question, but what is it that you love so much about running? I mean, are you one of these people who likes to get out on their own and run for miles and sort out what's in your head while you're out, or do you go out with a big group of people and love the social side of it, or the challenge of a race, or all of them together?
I think that's the beauty of it. I think at different times I like different things. So I got injured in February. I fell over training for Newport Marathon, and I tore my ligaments, and an old Achilles injury flared up. And when we took running away that time, I just missed being on my own. I just missed that half hour out where I was by myself. I missed the physical challenge that, you don't get through walking, you don't get through swimming. It's a very, very specific feeling you get after a run. And that's the bit I'm missing at the moment. If you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said, oh, it's the social side. I absolutely love being with a club or a group or wherever I could get to run with. And I think it changes, where you are in life. Like, I'm very busy at the moment trying to work out what I'm doing. And again, it's the consistency of running that I'm relying on, that I know once I go out, that half hour might be hard, it might be horrible because I'm coming back after injury, but I'll feel fantastic tonight, and then even better tomorrow. And then we go again. And I think the consistent, it's a control thing, I suppose, because it's always there. It's reliable.
Just going back, you mentioned the book, No Run Intended. I think there's a second book now as well, isn't there?
Yeah. I followed it up after the marathon. So No Run Intended took us to half marathon, and then Run Intended took us over after I'd done London, because obviously that came out for the sponsorship for London, and then that one then came out after. So that was quite cute as well, I suppose. But I'm writing one at the moment, but it's a slow process about how I use the exact same tools to start running as I did to stop drinking. And it's mad how parallel the journeys are, you know? Mad. And I hadn't seen it until a couple of weeks ago because I'd had this idea about like how my mindset was similar. But when you put the two journeys together, I've literally copy and pasted what I did, but opposite to what I did to start running, which is funny, really funny.
And is that just the strength of using the strength of your own mind, that stubbornness, just saying once I've made this decision, I'm gonna follow it through. I'm gonna keep on running, or I'm not gonna go back down the pub again, or whatever.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I see willpower very much like training a muscle now. Because as and I've learned this in my diploma, so like human beings are really terrible at willpower. We need the emotion to anchor in. And, you know, like at first I was like, oh, I've stopped drinking because of my kids. And yeah, it's been a massive, massive reason, but it's not the sole reason because I think even when I was drunk, I'm still an all right mom, like I didn't do anything that was going to harm them or, they always came first. I just really liked alcohol as well. And it wasn't enough. And I think when I like broke it down and broke it down and broke it down, I was like, I just want a better life for us. And the only way we're going to get a better life if I start, working properly, as in if I start getting, I'm not hungover, I'm not sort of like geared to go into the pub and things like that. Because I was always concerned about my next wine because I absolutely love alcohol, like I said. And I just think that you need to anchor in and you need to strengthen it. And I just kept thinking that. I was like, I've strengthened my legs and I've strengthened my head before. Now we strengthen my hand coming away from that wine glass. And it's really fascinating. So it's exciting.
Yeah. Do you find that same sort of strength helps you when you're in like the latter stage of races? Like you've mentioned, you've done, well, at least one marathon. I don't know if you've done any more, but everyone gets to that 18, 20 mile point, and unless you're elite or one of those annoying people who can just fly through,
Yeah.
normally all start to struggle and break down. You have the same stubbornness when you're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always, I've done 2 marathons now. I think 3 unofficial. But 2, I did Snowdon and I was really poorly. I got up to do it and my tongue had swollen and my throat was bad. And I was lucky enough to find a guy called James Thomas that I know from my stake, and he helped me round. But we got to after the half marathon, and I was like, "You've got this. This is fine. Even if you die at the end, this is fine. You've got it." And I think, yeah, I'm really quite lucky in that way that once my mind is set on something. My dad always said that if Hannah had to move a mountain and she only had a teaspoon, she'd have a go. And she'd get it done, sort of thing. So I think my determination is one of my better skills.
And in terms of your running as well, do you get involved with things like park run or group runs and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I've got a little group. I do a walk to run every couple of months. We're really lucky in Merthyr that we've got a community track now. So every 8 or 10 weeks, I take a new cohort of walk to runners. Park run, I would love to do more park runs, but the 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning with 3 children, is sort of like the holy grail. So I don't do enough of them. I have done, and I love them. And every time I do one, I'm like, you need to do this every week. And then next Saturday comes and there's someone's got head lice or tonsillitis or has been up all night. So I don't do as many as I can. But yes, the races I like more than anything. A half marathon is my favourite distance of all time. I've got Cardiff in October and then Snowdon Marathon again in October. So I'm gearing up for a summer of training now. So hopefully no injuries.
Yeah, and the half's it can be a nice distance because you can have a bit of a tilt at it without dying halfway around.
I just love it. And I love, like, my friend said to me once, so she ran with me, and she was like, if you didn't do so much talking on this half marathon, you might be an half decent runner. And I was like, but I just love it. I just see it as like a social thing. I literally speak to anyone. So she did Newport Marathon without me because I'd got injured. And I was like, think of all the friends you were going to make. And she was like, I'm not you, Hannah. I am absolutely not you. And I will not speak to anyone. And I was like, you've just got this running thing all wrong, man. Got it wrong.
Oh, you sound like my wife Michelle is sort of like that sometimes when she's off on races or runs, whereas I'll be like tunnel vision, not talking to anyone,
Yeah,
just getting
no,
on.
I love it. And I think when the book came out round about that time, and people in Wales started to sort of not know me by any means, I am no celebrity, but a couple of people were like, Hannah, and I was like, oh my God, it was like all my dreams had come true, that people were talking back to me. I was like, this is amazing.
And I guess, like, just to sum up, really, what would you say to anybody who was perhaps back where you were, hopefully not being quite so horrible to the reflection in the pub, but looking to try and change their lives in that way? How would you say get out and do it?
I think just do it. I think find yourself a group. I think a walk to run group is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of safety in numbers, and I mean that in the literal sense and in the sort of for the motivation purposes of it. I think find yourself a walk to run group. You literally have no idea what doors will open for you when you start running. And I don't necessarily mean about running. I mean the friends you're going to make, the paths you'll take, things you'll see. I remember doing the Great North Run. We'd gone up. I was really lucky enough to get a spot because the BBC had asked me to do a poem on running off the back of the book. And we went up to Newcastle, and I was just like, who would have thought that it's taken us to these places, you know? Who would have thought? And I've just seen and met so many phenomenal people and been so many places that I just don't understand why everybody doesn't do it. It's like my friend moved, she like completely uprooted and got a new job in Essex. So from Merthyr to Essex. And I was like, go and find a running group. Go and find a running group. Because that's how you make friends as an adult as well, I think. Like if you don't want to go to the pub, go and find a running group. And it just do it, because it's a whole new world out there, and it's an amazing world, and it's a welcoming world, and that's the bit I'll keep banging that drum until I die, because it's really important that people like me who felt like they had no place or no right to be in that community have got more right than anyone else, you know. And it's a safe space. Like there are more nice people than there are men or women, mainly men, shouting out of white vans at you when you're running. So
No, I've definitely seen it. I mean, Michelle has a running group. We've got lots of other running groups in Northants who do the same, but we've seen people who start and they're creeping to the end of the road at the start, bless them, and the happiness on that they get when they complete that first 5K, or I remember a run we did last year where we set out to do, I think, 5K, but we just like, oh, it's going to be like 6 or 7, it'll be a little bit longer, and that was going to be the longest run that a couple of these ladies had done. Got to it turned out it was going to be closer to 8, and actually they just turned around to us and said, we're going to go for 10, we're going to do the 10.
oh,
And they were just so excited and such a sense of achievement at the end of it, and it's sort of like everybody at the end was on a massive buzz, on a huge high. And
yeah, that's priceless as well, isn't it? I think like when you get to be part of someone's journey like that, it's such a privilege. And I never tire of it. So we're on week 5 of an 8-week walk to run, and come week 8, when they've done that 5K or they've run for 30 minutes, whichever they decide to do, I'm like really overwhelmed each time. I'm like, you've done so well, like please keep going. So
oh, definitely. I think it makes a huge difference. And there's a lot of people, maybe they won't be listening to this because they probably wouldn't be listening to a running podcast, but they'll sort of think, oh, running's just for Mo Farah or for Usain Bolt or whoever's winning such and such a race. It's not really for me, or it's for the people who go around part run in 16 minutes, when actually I think sometimes those people who make the biggest achievement and it makes the biggest difference to are the people who are new to it.
Yeah, definitely. And we're really proud, or I was very proud in Welsh Athletics when we did all the national surveys and things, and running is the biggest participation sport in Wales. So it's bigger than rugby, it's bigger than football. And when you look at the diversity now of people on the streets running, like, it's beautiful. Like, I didn't see runners when I was a kid in Ebervale growing up. I didn't know one person run, and like I'm in the car because I've got a mental household. And I've watched 3 people since we've been on this call run past my street, all different shapes and sizes, ages, sexes, races. And I mean, I haven't had that many in a terrace street in Merthyr, but you get my you get my point.
No, it's fantastic, isn't it? And it really is, I think, something for everyone. So yeah, that's a lovely place to finish. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today on the Running Tales
Thank you for
podcast.
having me. Thank you.
Thanks again to Hannah the runner, Hannah Phillips, for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast. If you enjoyed Hannah's story as much as I did, then please give us a positive review and rating wherever you listen. It really does help us to encourage other people to listen to the podcast and to hear fantastic stories like Hannah's. Remember, you can also find Running Tales on Substack, where we have written versions of these podcasts and lots of other stories from around the world of running. And all of our podcasts are also reproduced on our YouTube channel. So go and check that out as well. Have a great week, everyone. And I'll see you next week again on the Running Tales podcast.